Hello, BookTube and super friends. So, Victober has just about come to an end. That's the fabulous month of celebrating Victorian literature, originally devised by Katie at Books and Things, and with co-hosts and whatnot, all detailed down below. And this year, I actually did it like fully. So I did the prompts, and it's been great. That's what I'm going to tell you about. Quickly, so it's because there's a lot of prompts, a lot of books, so it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, I suppose. So I guess the main thing I read was Armadale by Wilkie Collins. So Wilkie Collins, well known for his sort of sensation fiction, The Woman in White, The Moonstone are perhaps his two most famous books. This one, Armadale, is ranked pretty highly as well, although maybe hasn't got quite such an exciting title. But I really loved it. You've got doubles, so the main thing that drives the plot is these two men who have the same name, and that creates opportunities for all sorts of potential crime and deceit and so on. And there's also, you never quite get full supernatural stuff, but there's a sort of mysticism to do with dreams and prophetic dreams. So that's really interesting as well. And a great villain, Lydia Gwilt, is a fantastic baddie. So I did this one for Marissa's prompt, which is read a Victorian work that was originally serialised. And to explore the kind of serialisation aspect, I got hold of the magazines in which it was serialised. So it was in the Cornhill magazine, and yes, it takes this many magazines to make one book. Bit like the glass and a half of milk in every bar of Cadbury's Dairy Milk. So I've been, I read it in the book, but I've been looking at the serial ones as well, sort of seeing, well, what do you get? The way people read it at the time, what do you get that hasn't sort of survived in the text that we tend to get? So one thing you get is other serialised novels. So this Cornhill magazine was a pretty sort of very respectable literary magazine, and you got writers like Elizabeth Gaskell and Anthony Trollope in it. Again, serialised novels, and that's what sort of intertwined with Armadale, which is makes quite an interesting contrast, because those are not sensation type stories. They're more like what people might have called domestic fiction. And some people at the time were saying, well, why is this sensation stuff coming into the Cornhill? We don't want to be reading this kind of thing in the Cornhill. But they were. And you also get articles. So, I don't know, who knows how people read the magazine? Did they read it like cover to cover? Given that people were getting these bound copies made up. This lovely marbled paper, it's fantastic. Maybe the articles were saved up for a rainy day. Don't know. So just to give you a flavour, you got your drama, English, during the reigns of Elizabeth and James. Falconry, modern. Farming of oysters. Flute, the Syrian. Ghost, Ralph Gruby's. Heroines and their grandmothers. I actually did read that one, so well done, clickbait headline writer. And I thought it would be something like Heroines and their grandmothers. I was sort of thinking, it would be like Florence Nightingale. Did you know her grandmother once wrestled a bear? But not really that. It was more about literature, actually. It was about how the Jane Austen type of fictional heroines lived much happier, calmer lives than the sensation ones who were getting full of doom and doing all sorts of schemes and things. Dude has a point. Certainly in this, where you get a fantastic villain, like I said. So the other thing you get is illustrations. So not quite a profusion of illustrations like in sort of magazines you got later on in the 19th century, but the main stories would have a picture at the beginning of the selection of chapters in that particular issue, and also an illustrated drop cap, so it was kind of punctuated by that kind of thing. I won't give you them all, although I have them all. If you want to see them, get in touch. My top 3 were that one, actually, a scary moment with a character unable to stop laughing hysterically while a man shows them a clock that he has been labouring on for many years. I also particularly liked comedy scene on a boat, not least because there's a minor character who's meant to be kind of an effete intellectual who's depicted as having green spectacles. I like the idea of the green spectacles being this kind of character marker. And the villain, Lydia Gwilt, looks great. I'll put up a picture of her, the woman who played her on stage as well. So there was a play version actually called Miss Gwilt, which is a better title. I also searched see if there was a real person ever called that, and there was in the 1960s. She won a Mini Cooper car, but opted to take the cash instead. Okay, so the magazine's full of interest as well as the story itself, but even these aren't the full thing, because the person buying a copy of the magazine with their shilling, a silver shilling with a bun-headed Victoria on it, they were getting something that looked like this, with extra stuff that would have been cut out and thrown away by Mr. Stationer doing the bound sets. So you had a cover was always the same, apart from the date. Adverts, and I do find these like super interesting. I won't go through them exhaustively, but stuff that jumped out at me. Well, they advertised their other books for a start. So Cornhill was published by Smith and Elder publishers, so obviously they were punting out their books as well, like Wives and Daughters, like perhaps one of the greatest titles ever of a book, The Ethics of Dust, 10 lectures to little housewives on the elements of crystallisation, by John Ruskin, because kids have got to learn about crystallisation somewhere. And The Book of Werewolves by Sabine Baring-Gould, a factual non-fiction book about werewolves, which was read by Bram Stoker, apparently. So you had a bunch of adverts at the front, bunch of adverts at the back, Glenfield starch by appointment to the somewhat manic-looking Princess of Wales, and something I still can't figure out what these actually were, aromatic bands. Patent aromatic chromo-elastic bands, with this amazing piece of what looks like conceptual art, illustrating them with the precise diameters. So the Victorians, people think they didn't have fun, but they had elastic bands that smelled nice. Okay, so Armadale, yes, great book. Lots of the kind of sensation things, the kind of uncertain landscapes, the sort of complicated plots and evil things that are being put together, both in a village and in the metropolis. You got grotesque characters, funny scenes, cliffhangers because of all the serialisation. So good stuff. Then Katie's challenge: read a Victorian book that plays with form in some way. Well, that would be Armadale by Wilkie Collins, which, apart from everything I've said, also sort of qualifies for that playing with form. If you think Victorian writers were the boring ones, and you needed your sort of James Joyce and Virginia Woolf people to come in the 20th century and start doing experimental stuff, think again, my friend. In a way, they were carrying on a tradition of experimentation. So here it's the letters and documents that are sort of make it more than a standard narrative, I suppose. So quite a lot of it is written by people's letters, quoting other letters and other documents within those letters. Quite long bits. In fact, it can be quite disconcerting when it goes back to the author. You've been reading the inner thoughts of Lydia, for instance, with the kind of authority of the character themselves telling you stuff, or which might be a little bit uncertain because they're a villain. Then you suddenly get Wilkie Collins. Who are you? What right have you got to come into this narrative telling us stuff from your godlike author perspective? We're used to the letters now. Yep, that was great. Then there was Kate's challenge. Kate Howe, read a Victorian book where religion is a component of the story. Now, yes, I could say Armadale again, but it, for me, mainly was two things. We've been listening, me and Jenny not in this room, unfortunately, but we've been listening to Anthony Trollope's Barchester Chronicles as audiobooks for quite a while now, working our way through them. So during the Victober month, we finished Dr. Thorne, which was great. So the first couple have got very ecclesiastical settings. The characters are like bishops and priests and archdeacons. The focus shifts a little bit, but you're in a kind of Trollope verse where all these characters are sometimes mentioned, but so they get walk-on parts. But Dr. Thorne isn't so full-on religious as the others. And then we've started Framley Parsonage, where you get a clerical hero again. So that's kind of in the zone. But I also read a short book called Cecilia de Noël by Lanoe Falconer, real name Mary Hawker. And this was great. I mean, this is very much a novella of ideas about religion and spirituality. So the setup is there's a country house that has a ghost. It's haunted. And there's a guy there who's like the character who you see mostly throughout, who's recovering from some kind of unspecified but super traumatic injury. And a character leads up each chapter, and all of these characters have different perspectives. So you get a totally materialistic guy. Well, anything that happens, however weird it might seem, it has to have a normal, rational explanation. A sort of if somebody saw a ghost in the night, it was indigestion and them taking a dream seriously, stuff like that. Then you get other people. There's someone who's like a spiritualist. There's different kinds of men of the cloth again. Talk of dissenters. I'd say if there's one thing I'm glad I've sort of picked up a little bit of factual info about that helps reading pretty much any Victorian book, it's some of the religious perturbations of the time and the kind of how people would have viewed someone taking a sort of Roman Catholic type of approach in their Anglican worship, for instance, or the dissenting sects. So there's a little bit of that, and we're waiting all the time. We keep hearing about this Cecilia de Noël, who is a neighbour. And she eventually comes in at the end and has her sort of reaction to the ghost is kind of like demonstrates a sort of idealised Christianity, really. It's hard for me to talk about it without making it sound like a very boring sort of exposition of a load of ideas. It's actually made really interesting and quite fun. Like there's kids running around who are quite funny, and we're sympathetic to the kind of point of view character, this injured guy, and we're curious about, well, this Cecilia de Noël, who sounds like a kind of wild bohemian sort of super kind person, what's she going to be like? And it's a ghost story as well, kind of an occult detective story almost. So that was good. Moving on through the challenges, Ros set us on with experience Victorian drama. Read, watch, or listen to a Victorian play. So we watched London Assurance, National Theatre at Home. It's like a streaming thing. You have to pay. It was fantastic. We would not in a million years have been watching this normally, I don't think, but it was really fantastic. It's a satire. It's a class satire. The people in it. Fiona Shaw, brilliant. That Dionysus guy out of the Thor movie. I'll add a caption to say who he was. Oh dear. That's like the least thing he's ever done in his whole career, but he's fantastic in this. Really, what can I say apart from it was really funny? It's kind of quite broad humour, but it was awesome, and it was great to be moving beyond just reading books, Then there was a group challenge, which a couple of strands to this. Read a Victorian work by Wilkie Collins that was loved by Jennifer Brooks. So we're honouring some of the sort of fallen comrades here. Obviously there's Armadale by Wilkie Collins, but I've also acquired a very attractive book of Wilkie Collins ghost stories. And I read one of these called The Dead Hand, which I talked about in another video about stories with the word hand in them. So I won't say too much more about that, just that obviously it's a thing that Wilkie Collins did as well. So I'm getting more and more interested in him. I've picked up a biography as well that looks fun. Then the other group challenge was read. Story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as loved by Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Well, I'm always up for doing that. A little Sherlock Holmes model was my minifig mascot for this particular challenge. And I read one of his occult stories called The Brown Hand, also in the Hands video, and then I've been listening to A Study in Scarlet, which is actually a novel length. It's the first ever Sherlock Holmes story. Listening to, not on Audible, but on Audrey, a small, personal and really fantastic audio book company that I heard about from Charlie Brooke. So here you've got, again, not like Audible where you've got all sorts of things, latest bestsellers, hundreds of things in a particular genre. You're talking more like a curated list with extras. So as well as a great reading, you get like a sort of expert commentator with some little notes and facts and pictures and stuff you can listen to, Spotify playlists. So it's like added value for like less money in this case than I'd expect to pay for an audiobook. So that's been good to revisit that as well. And finally, the group read. So a whole bunch of us read. The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. So Braddon I know from short ghost stories and from Lady Audley's Secret, which is a fantastic novel. It says in the intro that she sort of set out to start producing a sensation novel per year and a more literary novel. And this is one of her more literary ones. So here's the setup, right? You've got a woman who's very much a sort of romantic dreamer, a reader of novels, a reader of all sorts of, avaricious reader of romantic novels and a believer in those kind of fantasies. This is what life should be like. And even like, wouldn't it be great to like expire like, I don't know, Ophelia or someone, to be sort of romantically, what's the word? Dead. I'm thinking of the good, die young and beautiful sort of thing. So there's her, unworldly, but also has to live in the world, and is actually ends up as a sort of governess. Yes, governess. The teaching some kids, and then there's this guy, the doctor, not the doctor, but a doctor, who is a absolute plodder. He's unimaginative. Great guy, great doctor. Unimaginative. He wants to live in his parental home, be a doctor like his father, just keep everything going in a normal kind of way. So it's like she's TikTok and he's LinkedIn, and they get married. He is attracted to her, thinks like, yep, have wife is part of the plan. She looks like she'll fit the bill. He's the kind of guy who'll take you on your honeymoon to a spa town in the Midlands and have a budget of £10. Now, obviously, £10 was quite a lot of money, but it's, he puts the £10 behind the desk, and that's what he's going to spend, and they have the cheapest meals, and it's like ticking the box of honeymoon again. So that's the setup. She's like, I'd really have done this marriage, and he's pretty oblivious. Oh, pretty wife, I'm off to work now. Then she meets a guy who's looks to her like a sort of Byronic hero. So he's an aristocrat, wealthy, young. He's written poetry. He's kind of, he knows about philosophy and all that kind of stuff that she basically doesn't. So it's like, oh, and she's hanging out with him. So how's that going to end? Is she going to go all the way? What is it? He's like a bit of a, life. I tried that. What a load of rubbish that turned out to be. So he's kind of like a bit like beyond good and evil in his sort of perception of the world. So is he just going to take her off to, Venice or something? What about the doctor? Will he ever find out? Will other stuff we know about from her past come back to haunt her? So it is a sensation novel, really. I'd say good. I enjoyed it. It's page turning. There's stuff about Braddon's writing I didn't love. It's quite repetitive. Not so much, wow, another cliffhanger, because this was serialised as well. More like, wow, why are we hearing all this again? Character setup again in quite a repetitive way. A bit like new readers start here. It doesn't matter that it's chapter 35. I'm going to tell you all about the characters all over again. Here she is, she's sobbing, reading her novels, get it, right? And then the doctor, he's being boring, doing boring doctor things. And this might be part of the kind of, here's my literary book. She puts in an awful lot of references to other sort of culture, poems and stuff like that. A bit like Bulwer Lytton, who she was her sort of literary mentor. But can forgive all that, because it's a lot of fun. Good beginning, good ending. Middle drags a bit. And I've got to mention also, there's an element of self-mockery, probably, because there's a character in it who is a sensation novelist called Sigismund Smith. He's good value. A lot of us who read it, we wanted more Sigismund. So, that was my Victober, my first full Victober. Really loved it, so thanks to everybody, all those hosts and fellow readers. I've enjoyed hanging out on the Discord and that kind of stuff. Enjoyed acquiring mad piles of semi-rotting books. Yeah, good times. Okay, I will be back soon with something else.